Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, February 22nd, 2011. And I haven't made a video blog in a while. There's a lot going on around the country, including Wisconsin, most particularly Wisconsin. So I want to talk about that. I know the lighting is poor, so please forgive me. You can still hear my voice, so that should work okay. Anyway, so there's a lot of protests going on right now in Wisconsin, and some of the protests have spilled over to Ohio and I believe Washington State. And there's some Tea Partiers there too, but mostly it's the public workers unions, SEIU, those folks. The Wisconsin Governor Walker, is cracking down on the unions there. Public unions in Wisconsin do, in fact, receive a lot more benefits and privileges than public workers in other states. I know I'm from North Carolina. I was a public school teacher, high school teacher for 2 years, and I did not receive even close to some of the benefits they receive in Wisconsin. I got paid about $30,000 a year. Got some minimal health coverage. Can't remember what the exact plan was. This was a few years ago. I didn't have any children or anything, but yeah, that was about how much I made. And here's the thing: when you become a teacher, you do it with the understanding that you're not going to make a lot of money. You do it because you love the profession. I decided to teach high school because I really liked history. And I really wanted to teach history. And then 2 years into teaching, I really did enjoy it, but then I realized maybe I would like to move on to the college level and get my master's and doctorate degree and do it there. But you have to go into, when you go into teaching, you understand that inherently it's not a very well-paying job, and that's one of the costs of doing it. You get summers off. I had 3 months of summer off. I delivered pizzas for just 15 hours a week. I'm sure if you have a family, you might have to pick up a full-time job during the summer, or you might not work at the summer at all if you make a lot of money, as some of the teachers in northern states do. And I'll go over that later. But anyway, I'm not a big fan of Franklin Delano Roosevelt by any means. But FDR was right on one thing, and he talked about the difference between a public union, the public unions versus private unions. Now, private unions are fine, obviously. Like, workers should be allowed to voluntarily associate with one another. It gets to be bad when workers are coerced into joining a union. But as long as it's voluntary, I don't think there's any problem with the private sector unions. But these are public unions, and FDR had this to say. I'm reading one of his quotes. He said, "All government employees should realize that the process of collective bargaining, as usually understood, cannot be transplanted into the public service. It has its distinct and insurmountable limitations. The very nature and purposes of government make it impossible for officials to bind the employer. The employer is the whole people, who speak by means of laws enacted by their representatives." So we're the employer, the people, the taxpayers, or the Wisconsin taxpayers are the employer in this case. So it's intrinsically different from a private union in that respect. And FDR, who I oppose on policy, is a hero to these people. They don't even realize that he was not such a big fan of them. But you know, the Wisconsin public workers do receive a lot more benefits and privileges than public workers in other states, particularly the South. And actually, their education really isn't that much better. I saw some statistics today about how their reading levels are low in Wisconsin, so it's not even that great of a job. But a lot of these Wisconsin school teachers are exaggerating how bad they allegedly have it. There was, again, I'm reading from a website here. There was one teacher who was on CNN and said that, oh, now I'm going to have to take up a part-time job and I'm going to have to tighten my belt. And then it comes out that this same lady makes excuse me, makes $54,000 in base salary a year with summers off, and $32,000 in benefits, which is way more in benefits than I received as a teacher, and almost double the salary I received as a teacher as well. So she's not tightening the belt. Look, you went into a teaching profession. You're not supposed to make six figures. Let's see. Another one. Two teachers, a couple, a husband and wife, were on Ed Schultz show, the Ed Schultz show on MSNBC. Their salaries together combined come up to $137,000, and they're complaining about how they're going to have to tighten their belts. Another high school teacher in Milwaukee earns $62,000 in base salary with $26,000 in benefits. And of course, he was complaining during this whole thing. I mean, the list goes on and on. 60,000, upwards 70,000. I mean, these are not people who are barely scraping by or going to go hungry unless they're spending way more money than they're taking in. And in that case, they might be. But then that's the fault of the individual for being reckless in their own spending. So that's a problem. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I think it is awful that Governor Walker threatened to use the National Guard on these protesters. I disagree with these protesters, and I do think that state budgets are in really bad shape right now. That's one remedy, although there are many, many other remedies too that we might even want to take first. But nonetheless, while I support a lot of what the governor is doing in this situation, that threaten to call out the National Guard, I mean, that is very dangerous and should not be resorted to. Because if they can call out the National Guard on these guys, then what's saying they wouldn't call out the National Guard on the Tea Party? There's been no signs of violence on the side of the protesters. It's been a peaceful protest, and we live in a free country. If they want to storm the Wisconsin Capitol, Madison, Wisconsin, they have a right to do that without being threatened by the authorities to use the National Guard. Now, the Democrats in the legislature fled to Illinois. I don't know what the status of that is. In my view, they should be allowed to just go ahead and vote without them. I don't know what I don't know how all that works. State laws are very different from one another, but to threaten to use the National Guard, I mean, that is a little ridiculous. We need to protect their right to protest. Now, finally, before I get into the finally section, while we should protect the right to protest, their employer, the principals, and their employers should have the right to fire them if they're abusing their sick days. Reports are saying that sick day passes or doctor's notes are being passed at the protests, and these teachers are abandoning their students in order to do this, and they're missing many, many days of work. If you do that in the private sector, you get fired, period. So that's another difference between the private sector and public sector unions. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of private sector workers in Wisconsin are siding with the governor here. I would not be surprised one bit. It is different. The public workers are in a different class than the private workers. Private workers make less money. They receive fewer benefits. It's time to equalize that and bring the public workers down to the private level. Now, finally, this is going to become a major paradigm, I think, in the next few years. How far do we cut the welfare state? And I just want to say this on the federal level, because you can't do this in Wisconsin. Wisconsin obviously does not have its own army that's sending to Iraq and Afghanistan. But we must cut the warfare state before the welfare state. And I believe I said that before on here, but I need to stress that. The warfare state must be cut first. Because if we cut the welfare state first, and believe me, I want both to be dramatically diminished. But if we cut the welfare state first and continue spending billions upon billions of dollars bombing cities and villages in the Middle East over a cause that we're not even sure what is that about. We don't even know what we're doing there anymore. But yet we cut Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits that people have paid into for years and years and years and had faith that they would receive that money. If we cut the welfare state first, that's going to cause major unrest in the United States. We need to cut the warfare state first, and then we can talk about cutting the welfare state. But let's tackle the warfare state first, because that's a cause that both sides can get behind. I know a lot of people on the left who support Obama are frustrated with Obama over the war issue, and they would get behind that. Certainly, they're not going to get behind entitlement reform first, and that needs to be done too. But we have to cut war first. And that's the compromise. That's the grand compromise that we as a nation can get behind. Let's get out now, save billions and billions, possibly even trillions of dollars in the long run. And then we talk about entitlement reform. But that is what needs to happen. Otherwise, we're going to see massive unrest in the United States. People are not going to accept having their Social Security benefits cut when they were forced to pay into the system for all these decades. They're not going to accept having those cuts if we are still in Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, South Korea, whatever, 90 different countries around the world. I think we have 900 military bases around the world. We have to cut this empire first, and then we'll talk about those things later. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I have some family members in Wisconsin, so I'm sure they're paying close attention to what's going on right now. And if you're watching, hi. I hope everything is going well. And those are my thoughts on things. Anyway, have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.